Welcome to America's Hope. My first guest is Emily Sturge, and she is a Florida correspondent for Campus Reform. Emily is a current student at the University of Florida. She is studying political science and journalism, and she's joining us now to talk about what's happening on college campuses throughout the country, particularly given the fact that many students will be returning. Will we see a repeat, Emily, of what we saw at universities like Columbia, where people were chanting death to Israel and death to America?
You know, in the spring, we saw massive protests at college campuses across the country with these anti-Israel agitators. And at Campus Reform, we reported extensively on these protests. We've seen these protests kind of chill out over the summer. They've taken a little bit of a break. But I think as the presidential election ramps up, as we head towards November, we may see more of these protests break out. What we're seeing right now break out on college campuses is anti-American ideas. Anti-American ideas are being spread in the American education system. They're being spread in the classroom, and that's really what is inspiring these protests on college campuses.
Yeah, you're talking about something, you used the word inspiring them. Who's doing the inspirational, aspirational conditioning of these students to actually step outside of their classrooms and to chant death to Israel and death to America and let's do away with Western civilization?
The anti-Semitism that we're seeing on college campuses, it's part of a much larger agenda. This is part of an anti-American agenda to upend Western values. These are no longer just violent ideas happening behind closed doors. We've actually seen this anti-Israel student group at Columbia University say out loud that they're fighting to eradicate Western civilization. These are not violent ideas happening behind closed doors. They're out in the open. Students are letting us know what they're learning in the classroom because they are proudly stating these very violent and destructive ideas on social media. These anti-American ideas are being spread out in the open and now on social media by students.
Emily, why are they taking this approach? We're going back to October 7th, 2023, when Hamas terrorists attacked innocent people, civilians living in kibbutzim villages, as well as some of the cities there along the Gaza border, with the sole objective of eradicating Jewish people living there.
At Campus Reform, we're not surprised to see this. We're not surprised to see student groups at Columbia. They're saying the quiet part out loud. They're saying that they're fighting to eradicate Western civilization. And these are not empty words. This is a serious movement. This is a serious threat to America, to higher education, and to every student in higher education. This anti-American movement, it's a direct attack on our values of freedom, of liberty, of democracy, of rule of law. And this is a fight against anti-Semitism. This is a fight against anti-Americanism happening in our educational institutions today.
You were pointing out recently about DEI being part of the culprit here in radicalizing some students to come out on these college campuses and be against Jewish students as well as against America. Talk to me about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and why you think that has been part of the conditioning of these students to come out against America.
The way DEI is being taught in schools is what is driving anti-Semitism at the college level. The American education system has fueled this hatred for America and for the West. These far-left ideologies that students are learning in the classroom, particularly DEI, they paint America as inherently oppressive and apparently inherently racist. So professors are radicalizing students and brainwashing them to essentially hate their own country. DEI creates a culture of victimhood on college campuses. It creates this culture of resentment among students against their own country, which is fueling this anti-Americanism, which is also fueling anti-Semitism. And college students are unfortunately proud to have these ideas. They feel like they're allowed to have these ideas because that's what they're learning in their classrooms.
What are the, I've got to ask you this question. We know what they're learning in the classrooms based on what you're saying, but what are they learning at home? I mean, mom and dad are probably watching this, perhaps not even realizing that their children, who are now college students, are actually engaged in these kinds of activities.
Well, what they're learning at home could also be contributing to the fact that Gen Z is becoming the most unpatriotic generation. This generation is disconnected from America. We no longer have, well, many members of Gen Z no longer have the appreciation that previous generations held for America. Part of this is because of the DEI education infiltrating K through 12 and infiltrating colleges and universities. And campus reform highlights that there's an alarming trend among higher education. 2/3 of colleges and universities across America require these DEI courses to graduate. So these far left radical ideas have literally become mandated into our education system, once again, fueling this cycle of anti-Americanism in higher education and beyond.
Emily, how do we get here? You're part of Generation Z. When you look at your college classmates, how do we get here?
What students learn in the classroom, they take outside the door of that classroom. This spread of violent ideas, sometimes it's sparked in the classroom, and then students feel like they can take it out to the middle of campus. That's what we saw with the tent encampments happening among so many colleges and universities this past spring with the uprise of anti-Israel agitators on college campuses. Students took these radical ideas from the classrooms and then they put those violent tactics out on the street. These are destructive mindsets being created by professors in college classrooms. Professors glamorize very destructive mindsets like socialism and Marxism, and then students feel okay and they feel like they can take these violent and destructive ideas out onto the streets.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about this. I want to talk to you about what responsibility you believe college professors have, and as well as college presidents have, as we look forward to this fall semester that's coming up. What responsibilities and accountability do they have to the students like yourself who are going to school to get a solid education to give them a better worldview of how to appreciate the world and not denigrate people because of their religion or their faith or their culture? I'm talking to Emily Sturge of Campus Reform. We're back in a moment with America's Hope. Welcome back to America's Hope. I'm talking to Emily Sturge. She is part of Campus Reform, and she is a university student who is studying political science and journalism there in Florida. And we were talking about the previous segment about what is likely for the fall semester on college campuses. A lot of people were talking about football and everything else, but let's face it, there are some students out there, as you've talked about, who want to eradicate Western civilization. And you've explained why. I'd like you to talk to me about where do we go from here?
Safety should be the number one priority of university administrators. Universities need to be held accountable for letting destructive and violent anti-Semitic and anti-American ideas flourish on college campuses. Universities need to take accountability, and they need to stop allowing violent protests to take place. They need to protect their students. They need to maintain a healthy campus environment by controlling these protests as soon as the violence breaks out. University administrators need to take action, and they need to stand up to protesters. They don't need to be negotiating with protesters like we saw at Columbia University. In comparison, in stark contrast to what we saw at Columbia University, where that university president actually negotiated with anti-Israel agitators, at my own university, the University of Florida, our university president, Ben Sass, from day one stood up to the violence. Immediately after the October 7th attacks on Israel by Hamas, our university president warned protesters that the minute violence broke out, they would be held accountable. That's exactly what happened at my university. There were arrests and suspensions that occurred when protesters had violence going on in the middle of our campus. That is the type of firm approach that more university presidents should be taking in order to keep this violence and chaos under control to maintain a safe campus community for everybody involved.
Emily, that's a very heroic and yet responsible thing for your college president to have done. We saw during the last year, we saw college campuses erupt in the violence as you're talking about. College presidents going before members of Congress for congressional hearings, and even at that point, not really stepping up to say, "Hey, this is wrong. We've got to root this type of thing out. We will not tolerate violence." And some of those presidents lost their jobs, by the way, or reassigned. To those colleges out there that are not taking up the leadership role in making sure that students are respectful of other students, what's your message to them?
We need to confront anti-Americanism and anti-Semitism today so that we can ensure that the next generation has a society to inherit in the future. And right now, that job is falling into the hands of university administrators. That's why I'm so proud of my university president for standing up against violence and standing up against destructive ideology being spread on college campuses. We need to preserve the core principles of America and higher education. We need to actively dismantle this toxic ideology that's being spread on college campuses. We need to stop the spread of this in classrooms, and we instead need to be defending unity. We need to be defending American principles. Colleges should look into restoring this in their curriculum. They need to rid their institutions of curriculum that promotes such anti-American ideas, because that is creating a very unpatriotic generation that is taking these violent ideas out into the middle of campus where they protest with such violence that shouldn't be happening on college campuses in America today.
Hey, let me take you to another subject matter, and of course, it's still the same subject, but very much aligned to it. Social media. You've been a staunch fighter against big tech, conservative sponsorship, after experiencing a problem firsthand. I'd like to ask you if you have, since that particular episode and now the subsequent demonstrations that we've seen on college campuses, if you think technology and social media has further denigrated Jewish people as well as those particular Jewish students who just want to go to college, get their education, and contribute to society and not take away from it.
I have faced social media censorship firsthand for sharing my conservative ideas on social media apps. And that is the same type of censorship that we see on America's college campuses. So many conservative ideas are censored in America's college classrooms. Conservatives like myself feel like we can no longer speak up because we face punishment from professors through the form of lower grades. We also see backlash from our peers who often say very negative things about us, make fun of us. Some even go online to make fun of us because of our conservative ideas. This type of censorship is very dangerous. Our country needs the free flow of ideas. That's what's so great about this country and so great about having the First Amendment. I think everybody should be able to talk about their beliefs as long as so that they aren't extremely violent beliefs. But yeah, this censorship is a very dangerous thing, and it's very dangerous when it happens on college campuses. Students who are Jewish on college campuses, I'm sure, are having their personal experiences censored because they are not part of this far left minority, this fringe minority of anti-Israel protesters. It seems like their beliefs are being uplifted on college campuses, whereas the experiences of Jewish students maybe are not being uplifted in the same way.
You know, Emily, you're in your last year of college, and you might be even going to law school. What's your dream? What's your American dream, and how do you hope to accomplish it?
My American dream is, of course, to raise a family, to raise an educated family, to own a home one day, and to give back to this country. And I think the way to restore that is to restore the core principles of American values in American education. Of course, the American education system should be prioritizing American values, but unfortunately, that's not what we're seeing today. We are seeing so many anti-American values and anti-Semitic values being spread in the American educational system. I'd like to see colleges restore these ideas of the American dream and restore civics education and values of America instilled within their curriculum, because that's what gets young people informed. That's what gets young people engaged in society. And that's really what this country needs right now. We need young Americans to feel connected to this country and committed to upholding American values.
You know, you say that, and I'm listening to all the reasons why many foreign students want to come to America to study on our college campuses and get that kind of education that's values-based. You know, I just marvel at the fact that you've just stated that, and yet we have American students who tend to denounce that when they go out onto the streets or on college campuses and disrupt through protests that can be violent or protests that demean certain groups of people. And all of this is stemming, of course, from what took place on October 7th and then the subsequent fact that Israel, defending itself, went into Gaza to get rid of Hamas. When you see some of your college campuses erupting in anti-Semitism, when you've talked about it before, have we lost the values that we hold dear in America and on college campuses?
On college campuses, anti-Semitism and anti-American ideas have joined together to create this common goal to destroy the West. Once again, these ideas, these anti-American and anti-Semitic ideas, are what's being spread in college classrooms, and that's why students are going out into the middle of campus and protesting against Israel. It's very sad. It's agitating to watch because, yes, these students are very lucky to have an American education, and then they are learning anti-American ideas. It seems very backwards, but that's because there are very far left professors in America's education system who are promoting destructive ideas like socialism and Marxism. That's what's being taught in university classrooms. That is what is inspiring such destructive ideas among students.
Do you think it's designed that way to destroy America from within?
You know, I think the left is really pushing that. I think the left has gained this foothold on America's college campuses because they know that this is an impressionable group of young voters. The left is looking at this as they can take this group and they can turn this group into votes come November. That's why so many far left anti-American ideas are being spread by far left professors in the college classrooms, because the left is trying to gain this foothold of voters and secure a win for themselves come the next election in November.
Emily, I often say on this program that home is where the heart is, and that really the greatness of our nation begins in the homes of its people. What were you taught at home?
I was taught values of family, values of faith, and values of being pro-America. And apparently that's no longer what's being taught in many of America's homes, because I've seen as my generation has become the most unpatriotic generation. My generation is very disconnected from America. Many members of my generation just no longer feel this love for this country that previous generations had. I think, yes, some students or some members of my generation are learning this at home, and then they are taking it to their college campuses. But students are also learning this in classrooms, in K through 12, and all the way through higher education. The version of American history that is taught in America's classrooms is ultimately what is driving this phenomenon. Generation Z is being exposed to this version of history and past wrongdoings by America that paints this country in such a negative light that my generation is left with this very sour taste in their mouth about American history.
My final question is, what's your hope for America?
My hope for America is that Generation Z hopefully has a turnaround and we start to see more members of my generation become more inspired to go back to patriotism, to go back for love for America, because it's very sad to sit back and watch as my generation has become the most unpatriotic generation. We need to remember that Generation Z, today, they're in college classrooms. Tomorrow, they will be the future leaders of America. They will be CEOs. They will be running businesses. They will be running our government one day. And I'm one of those members of this generation. So I hope to see members of my generation experience a shift where they no longer are accepting the lies from the left and no longer accepting those lies as truth, I hope to see them using their own critical thinking skills, and then add positively to the workforce and add positively to society as the years go by.
Emily Sturge, she's Florida correspondent for Campus Reform. She's a current student at the University of Florida, and she's doing great things for America and you.